In our last ticket one under installing domain services, you have installed a news forest and you have created a brand new domain by using this option and created corp.jobskillshare.org on plab SA01. So you know how to create a full new forest domain and then Active Directory and things like that. But what about if you have already one domain controller, let's say DC1 is running, and a company asks you to create another domain controller for redundancy, for high availability, improve performance, scalability, many other things, geographic distribution, so many other things can happen. And that's mainly for, like, if one goes down, then you have another available. For many other reasons that people will have two domain controllers running in the company. If you see one, then you may want to ask that question, and they may have the answer for that. That why do they have one? Now, in terms of you getting hired and doing this sort of things, will be very, I would say, rare. But you can come across this type of, task based on your job role. How much experience do you have with domain controllers? Based on that, you will be given this type of scenario. So let's go ahead and spin up our lab by going down to the lab and then just launching the lab like. Once your lab is up and running, make sure to turn on all the machines. And if you see something like this, go ahead and hide it. And when we hide it and not follow the directions in this lab, which we're not going to do that, we're doing something custom. This means there will be no support. So please do not reach out to support for any issues unless you cannot turn on the machines or things like that. Now, if you follow my video step by step, you should have no issues because you're using the same lab. Now, let's get started. Where are we going to do this process? So we have, let's say you join this company, and in this company, we have plab DC01, our main domain controller, only one domain controller. We don't have any other domain controller, and you can verify it by going to plab DC01 and actually checking the Active Directory. So first, let's do that. Do we have a two domain controllers or multiple domain controllers running here? How can we check it? By just going to the Active Directory. So once your plab DC01 is open, go ahead, click on Tools, open Active Directory Users and Compute. And you can simply come to the domain controllers right here, and you see that we do not have multiple domain controllers. As you can see, it's only plab DC01. Also, you can go to search, type CMD or PowerShell, both will work. But in this case, I'm using CMD. You can also use other commands, but this is the one that you can use. Basically, go to CMD and type nl test and then /dc list colon. Basically, after that, you basically type the practicelabs.com, which is your domain. So if you just type this, you see you're going to get the primary domain controller, which is this one. And then if you have multiple, it will show multiple. We will test that when we have the multiple domain controllers running. So to add a new domain, we are going to work on plab DM01 because this have Hyper-V installed and the machine already have operating system. So we don't have to waste our time installing another operating system. So let's go ahead and open plab M01 and log into the server and open the Hyper-V manager. So you're going to click on Start, Windows Administrative Tools, and find Hyper-V Manager right here. Let's open that. And you can see we have multiple computers, machines available, virtual machines available. And in most of your companies, when you work as a sysadmin, you're going to see exactly the same thing. Hyper-V Manager, VMware, or some other virtualization type of technologies. People are using it these days heavily. And you will see multiple domain controllers just like this. So in this case, we have plab DC01. We're going to start it first and connect to that basically a machine. So first we need to find out what's the status of this machine, because in your company, it could be you doing it from scratch. You already know how to install a server from scratch. So imagine you just went there, you created the VM, you just installed the whole operating system from scratch. And again, I'm going to remind you that it's not just installing a server. Of course, you will be given IP address. You will know how to handle the security, and all that stuff is something that company will tell you, because everybody have their own templates, their own way of doing things. So don't be shy to ask these questions. As you know how to install a server, but you may not know what is the standard, what do they name servers, how do they name drives, and all that sort of stuff is a company specific thing. So that's something they will let you know. Now when you come to this point, we are going to basically minimize this, and we're going to do all control delete here and log into this server. And most of these computers have the same password for the lab that you're using for practice lab. So I just logged in. The first thing I noticed that it's not joined to the domain by just looking at the screen, because I know just looking at the screen, I didn't get other users. So this means this machine is a workgroup machine. It's just named that way. So even if it says plab dc01, that doesn't mean it has a domain controller running, because one, if you finish, you see that whole scanning is finished on the left side, you don't see ADDS. And I can now confirm it by going to tools. I don't see any Active Directory stuff right there. But if I go to local server, I see that the server is a workgroup computer. So the first thing we need to do is to make sure that DC01 knows about this machine. We need to add it to that domain. How do we do this? We are going to go ahead and click on workgroup, go to change, and here we are going to type practicelabs.com. So again, we got the error, and I'm sure this is probably related to something to DNS or something like that. So yeah, it's pointing us towards DNS. So the first thing you need to check is the IP address. So practicelab.com. We're gonna come over here, go to the network settings, and we may get error here again. So it's okay. It didn't get an error. Okay, so we're gonna go to properties now. IPv4, and you see there's no DNS set for this computer. There is an IP, but there's no DNS set for this computer. So what we need to do, we need to go back to plab dc01 and open CMD and type ipconfig. And the address that we want to use is 0.1. And if you want to see everything, you can do ipconfig/all. These are all basic commands you learn from from your IT support skills. So when you have this loop back address, that tells me that it's going back to the IPv4 address, which is 01. So I'm going to go back to plab dm01, and here we are going to type 192.168.0.1, and we'll click OK. And let's go back to, so you see now it's working. So let's say, for example, you get an error. Make sure you close this first, close the error first, and then come back to your Ethernet, right click on your Ethernet, disable it and enable it. If that don't work, then uncheck the IPv4. So you can right click, go to properties, uncheck this part right here, this one, click OK. And then once you click OK, close it, and maybe disable and enable one more time, and then try it, and this should pop up. So now we know that the default administrator is also a domain admin in our plab dc01. So let's try that password. It should work. There you go. Now this virtual machine, plab dc02, is a part of a domain controller. It's not a domain controller yet. It's not a domain controller that we can use to call it a second domain controller in our company. We can't. It's just a machine that is being managed right now. So we have to do the whole part of domain, adding the domain and all that sort of stuff right now. But let's confirm in plab dc01, where is this machine? So if I go back to Active Directory, computers, plab dc01 is right here. I can refresh, and there you go, it's right there. Even if it was there before, that's probably because of the lab, but now you know for sure that it's being there and it's active. So I can just come back here, and you see it has all control delete for the server. And then whenever you're in the VM, you need to basically restore the window of the VM, go to action, all control delete, and there you go. You have to do that in the VM. And now if I scroll down, I can't actually see the whole VM again, but I have to actually maximize it. You see we have other users, and that has practice labs on it. So I can come and I can log in to administrator account just like that, and it's moving that domain. So maybe we should write the whole domain like that, practice labs slash, and then log into the domain. So now our next part is to basically add this domain controller to our current domain. And to do that, we will start with the manage, just like you did it before, add roles and features, and then you'll click on next, next. As I mentioned, the naming and IP addresses is something you can talk to your company. They will tell you how they do it. And then click on Active Directory Domain Services, click Add Features, click Next, 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 and install. This is the process you're just gonna remember. You do it like 3, 4 times, you're gonna remember it. All right, so we're going to promote this server to a domain controller. And basically, we are going to add a domain controller to the existing domain. As you can see, it automatically picked the domain for us. And the username is also have access. If let's say you created a new domain admin, you could change it right here. So let's go ahead and change that. Click next. And we're going to give a password. This would be a little more complex password probably. So just give it whatever you want. Also having the first two options checked, domain name, DNS server, global catalog, GC. Now, when you have these two checked, that's the main reason why you're having the second domain controller is to have a backup DNS that ensures the redundancy when it comes to IP addresses or resolutions of names. And when it comes to the global catalog, that also ensures that you have that accessibility, information, objects, optimization, performance, and things like that comes under this. And that's why people have two domain controllers because they kind of work with each other. If you uncheck these two and selected the read-only domain controller, then of course that is only for people who don't want to do any changes to the domain, but do want to get the authentications and things like that work. And the read-only domain is usually used in remote locations where you do want to give the Active Directory, read-only copies to somewhere else. Also, basically bandwidth optimization. There are definitely on offline authentication kind of things going on. So there's benefits to each type of options. But in most cases, if you go to a company and they have two working domain controllers, they're not going to have three checked. Like the third one will not be checked in those two. That's probably going to be the first two right here. And let's go ahead and click next here. And the DNS will be installed on this as well. Now, replicate from this depends on what type of structure people are following in their companies. If it's a large, very large company and performance is the issue, then maybe they may specify a specific domain controller and that designed for bandwidth optimization. But if it's redundancy, maybe people will just probably leave this like this because maybe if they have multiple domain controller and one goes down, then there's redundancy going on. So of course that's really up to the different type of structure, topologies and design. That's really up to the company, and you can ask them why do they have specific replication design. So for now, we're just going to leave it like that and click next and next again. If you are a scripting person, PowerShell person, then maybe you can come over here, open this, modify this, and you can use that. Click next here, and we're going to wait and install this domain controller. So the whole process is done. It's going to restart, and now we'll have two domain controllers. We can actually hit out to plab dc01, and you see this plab dc02 was here before. Let's go ahead and refresh, and boom, that plab dc02 is gone automatically from here and went where? Let's refresh. It came over here. This tells us that things are moving along because we didn't touch this, we didn't move it, and automatically this domain controller detected that this is another domain controller, and you see the type is GC, and you can check the name and everything. And if we go back to our command that we used before, I'm not sure if we have the history for that. Yeah, we have. So if I type it, you can see right here, you can look at this right here. We got the primary domain controller, still the first one, and we got the second one, which is plab dc02. So we have successfully added the new domain in this environment. So let's go back to the plab dm01 virtual machine, plab dc01. It's already on. Let's do all control delete, and we're going to log into this domain controller now. This is a domain controller. This is not a normal domain join server anymore. Very powerful machine at this point. So right now we logged in, the server manager is opening, and you can see on the left side it will pop up ADDS, all of that stuff will pop up right now, just to indicate that this is a second domain controller. There you go, ADDS, DNS. Let's go to the Active Directory, users and computers. And if I come over here, open the Active Directory users and computers. And let's see, you have to wait a second for it to pop up. There you go. And practicelabs.com is right there. Let's go to users. So you see how we have all the finance OUs are available right here. These are organizational units, and these are containers with no icon. You see there's a little icon in there. So basically, you have successfully done your task, but maybe they will tell you, can you test it to make sure everything is working? So let's first add a user in this domain, which is our second domain. And we're going to do test one. And let's do test one. Click next and give it a password. And this is a normal user that we have just added into this domain right now. So we can go back to plab dc01, open the Active Directory, and here, let's go down. We don't see it because we need to refresh. And there you go, test one is working. So you see, you added a test one in a second domain controller and what, and I can tell this if I added test two in this domain controller, that test two will show up on the second one. That's because we decided to do replication between all of these domains. So let's do another in this one. We're going to add test two into the main PDC machine. So we're going to do test two right here. Let's do test two and give it password. Oops, password did not match. Let's do that. And we're going to do this and finish this. So now we have test 2 in the plab dc01, and now we're going to go back to plab dc02 to test if this application is working from this end. So let's go ahead and refresh. Click on the users. Oops, click on the users and refresh. And now on the bottom, you should see test 2 right there. So it's now, if there's any issues, of course, you can go and do a little more research, and that would require a little more advanced knowledge. And basically, you're going to go to CMD. So the first command you should learn is repadmin slash show rp rep l. That's kind of replication. So rep l, if you do this, you see that you're going to get all of these basically, results. And if you see something like this, rep is a running command show against all DC locations, and you get all of this information right here. Basically, this kind of tells you that things are working. If there was any issues, you may start getting, errors and things like that. You can see it was successful. It gives you the time, last attempt, all of that stuff. Basically, shows you that. So what if plab DC01 goes down in your company? This is the main domain controller. And of course, that would be a big issue in your environment. But will your second domain controller work? Let's try that. So we have the second domain controller working. I just shut it down by coming here and just shut it down directly. And all other machines were connected to the plab DC01, but the replication already happened. So we know that plab win10 is also connected to the second domain controller. So the only issue in these labs are going to be the static DNS, which I feel like that's going to be an issue. But other than in your companies, when you plug in a laptop or a desktop in your network, most likely all of the computers are going to automatically get those addresses. So let's go ahead and first go to plab dm01, and we're going to log into our domain controller and basically do a create a user, and let's see if the new user can be logged into this type of machines. So for that, we need to do the console mode because we want to be in front of the machine. Now we don't want to use automatic because us turning the domain controller down could have issues with that. So first, let's try console mode. You're just in front of that machine, control or delete, and then basically you're going to log into this server. And you may already detect some of the issue like slow login. That could be an issue with the domain. But once you log in, you're inside the VM, and in the VM, plab dc02, go to Active Directory, open your Active Directory, and here what we're going to do, we're going to add a new user. Okay, we're going to add a new user, and let's call this user help desk. And this is a help desk account. Okay, so let's uncheck the first option, finish. So we are just adding a help desk user in practice lab users in here. Let's see what happens. So we may see some issues because if you remember when we are creating this domain, we also pointed this domain server to the primary domain. And let's go ahead and first see if we can fix that by going to the DNS of that this domain controller. So let's go ahead, open this. Actually, by going to run, because we're gonna get a error, and type run, and here in the run, type ncpa.cpl, and here go to the Ethernet, go to properties, type go to the IPv4, and here I want you to remove the 192 address 168 because this is pointing to the domain that is shut down. And go ahead and type 127.0/0/1 and remove the bottom one. So basically, in the beginning, of course, if everything was working, it's just pointing to that domain. That's a primary domain, and then it's using its own DNS as well. We're not doing that. We're just going to point because we only have one domain right now. So we want to make sure that it's running perfectly fine. That IP is down, so there's no use to it. So now I'm going to basically go down here and go to the Active Directory, and here helpdesk is already added. Let's give it some more rights. I'm going to make it a domain admin. Okay, so the question is, of course, the other machines in this environment are all static. We have added those machines as well statically. So the point is that I'm making here is that the other machines may not work because of the DNS, but we can try it. So if you go to the console mode on this machine, which plab win10 was added to, originally added to plab dc01, then when we install the domain controller, it also pulled that machine to its own domain. Let's see if we can log in to the newly created user that we have created. So you're going to get this type of error, and that's fine because the thing is this machine, if you remember, is also pointing directly to the first domain statically. In real world, that's not going to be the case because of, like I said, networking. Everything is done through automatic way. So let's log into this machine as an administrator and change the IP back to the domain right here. Now you must be wondering, in the company, do we have to do this manually? No. As I mentioned, when you plug in your computer in the company's network, it should have been done by network engineers or sysadmin. When you plug into that port, it will automatically detect your default gateway, DNS, all that sort of information, and DHCP, all that as well. So you're not doing anything in networking in those type of scenarios. So here we just have to do this because we have very few machines and we need to make it static. So here again, we got that error. So this is a permission thing. So we're going to go ahead and open run ncpa .cpl, And if I come over here, go to properties and go to IPv4 properties, and here you see it's pointing back. What we need to do now, we need to point this to the second domain controller. And what I mentioned before, this is done automatically in your, even in your home computers at work as well. So if I come to the second domain controller and open the CMD and I do ipconfig, let me show you this. Go back here, ipconfig, and you see this is 100. This is the address that we need to use. So we need to come back to the plab win 10, and then we need to use 100. And in real companies, this is going to be this one, the top options. Both will be the top options, and you don't have to worry about this. So if I do this and then I sign out, and then I try to use the help desk account again now, look at this. It detected the help desk immediately and it logged in. All about DNS. So what did you learn from this? You learned that how important is DNS in networking, in computer IT support professional role, sysadmin role, networking role, cybersecurity role, cloud administration role. DNS is like, if DNS is not working, if DHCP type of things are not working, basic networking is not working, you really can become a sysadmin. You really can become anything advanced, because if you don't know these things, it's really hard for you to troubleshoot at this level. And that's why we have so much emphasis on the basics and foundational networking. We have done a very hands-on courses on networking, and if you are feeling that you're lacking this information, I highly recommend you go and take our networking courses, because that's really going to break down all of this concept and in detail and in an explanation and everything like that. So realistically, in a company environment, if my domain controller went down because my networking is done through automatic DNS configuration, all of these machines will not be impacted, because my DNS would also not have any issues. It will automatically detect the DNS because we have configured it that way through networking, and then they will pick that, and basically this machine will be the king of this network, and I don't have to go to each machine and change it for, unless I have anything static going on. Of course I need to go and do that, but in this case you have learned a lot, how to do the management and everything, second domain controller. And of course this is not the end. When you start working in a company and this is something you have to deal with, then of course you need to go into more documentation. You have to spend that time as a sysadmin system engineer. No course will ever cover troubleshooting at that level. You have to really be involved in communities. You have to open its documentation. You have to find more commands. You have to find more status events and things like that, and that's going to make you a proper engineer. But you only want to invest that sort of energy and time when you get the job. Then at this moment you can really take this project and say that I have done the additional domain controller, and people will respect it. You can talk about these commands and people will respect it as a sysadmin. But beyond that is, unless somebody's looking for a super expert engineer or very experienced engineer, then maybe they will go beyond that. But the beyond that is only for you to be able to work and just spend that time and headache and stress. Just take it when you're working and getting paid for it. Don't spend too much time after this. Unless you want to, you have more time, that's your choice. But my suggestion to all members are that you cannot go beyond this, because you can never end this sort of learning. That